All right, and we're back. Continuous
This
chaos
is
with Chelsea and
Continuous
Scott.
Chaos. We can't. Like, we always talk over each other when we do.
I know we actually probably should. If we're gonna do any sort of preparation, we should probably actually land on an intro for this thing.
Or we should just agree to who's doing it on which one.
Oh yeah, that might
be
be
like,
good.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do it this one, or you're gonna do it this one.
That would also be smart. All right. Well, yeah, this is Continuous Chaos with Scott and Chelsea. How are you doing?
I don't know why you asked me that, because I was actually just about to be like unsolicited. I was about to be like, I'm tired. Are you tired? Like, we've been doing this for like a long time.
A lot, yeah, long. I mean, yeah, I guess people can kind of reverse engineer how much time we put into this set of episodes on one night, but I'll leave them to do the math.
Oh my God.
When we last left off, you had a question for me, I believe.
I did. So I don't exactly know how I got here, because that's kind of in the vein of Continuous Chaos, as it were. We were talking about how, like, I'm not a real person, about, like, the concept of, like, meditation and, like, spirituality and stuff.
Okay.
That's exactly what it was. So we've talked about this before, and I don't remember if it was on the podcast or not, but this idea that, like, I seem like, I don't know, like, if it's kind of an ironic person or a hipster person or a granola hippie person, like whatever probably offensive label people want to use for other groups of people. Like, they're never meant to be like nice. I'm sure that there was another, term, but like that, the like, I want to say, is that what being basic is? Because, like, I hate that term. Oh my God. But, like, what?
No, no, it's fine. Keep going.
I mean, my face made a face, and I know you could hear it, but nobody else knows what that looks like. Nope. But I think you can hear sound and know what my face looks like.
Sure do.
It's like when I talk about the ocean. Oh my God. I can't even. So you just saw it again. Oh, that's fun.
1000%.
It's like a trick.
This is playing really well for this audience that can't see you or me or know at all what we're talking about.
But the way that you laugh at it is unique. It's different than other ways you laugh. So maybe they're living through you in this experience.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm taking a lot away from this. Don't you worry.
So, I know you are, because you enjoy it when I, like, I don't know, have a complete, like, full spiritual, emotional experience of things, which happens more often than it probably should. It's a lot of energy that I expel on life. So, yeah, what does basic mean? Is that what this is? I don't know. I feel like I'm having trouble with this because I hate all these stereotypes, but I feel like it has something to do with, like, pumpkin spice lattes and yoga.
Yeah, so it's sort of.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's sort of the. Let's see. Okay, I have to think. It's like the really stereotypical, like, image of a girl, I guess. So it's like pumpkin spice lattes and Ugg boots and infinity scarves and
like yoga pants,
like I'm trying to think of some other stuff wrapped up in that, but I think those are the high points. But that's kind of it. It's just the kind of that, like, stereotype of, like, that girl in Starbucks, like, you know, that girl. We all know that girl. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and this is what I'm like my current goal in my very uneventful life is trying to determine if, like, this whole time I am that girl and I, like, didn't get the memo. And I don't quite like it. Like, I don't like that we're making anyone that girl, but sure. I really don't want it to be me. And, like, I don't know. Everything about this conversation, this is going to, like, devolve really quickly, but I just, like, it makes me feel like a terrible garbage person to say this, but, like, yeah, there's elements of that I don't want to be associated with, but then I'm also mad on behalf of people who are labeled as that, even if it's not me, that it's just, like, that's shitty. And then it also frustrates me that there's people that want to be labeled as that, and that confuses me equally. And then I get into
people
thinking
that like aspire to be basic? Is that like a thing?
I have no idea, but I feel like
I know that
maybe
people like I know that like it's been around enough now that people are definitely like I'm not gonna say they're trying to reclaim it, but they are using it ironically. Like they're aware of the stereotype themselves and kind of use it that way.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe is that what I'm doing? Am I reaching that like basicness, self-awareness, something?
Channeling your inner basicness.
I don't know what's going on, and there's so many other elements because then now there's like other like trendy things where it's like it's cool, like it's just people that like they jump in a little too far to the stuff, like, and I get confused because I'm that person who's like always, I want to say ahead of the trends, except that sounds like I think I'm all that. Like I'm almost so ahead of the trends I'm behind them. And so I never get to like cash in, and I'm like never the cool kid, and I always feel like I'm either playing catch up or looking backward, or like it's very confusing is what I'm trying to say.
You're like so in my business classes that I talked about earlier and how I don't really use them a lot, there's like a curve. It looks like a bell curve, but it's called the innovation adoption life cycle, and there's like the early adopters, and those are the people that are on kind of like the bleeding edge, but then there's the people that are to the left of that, and those are the innovators. So you're there, but you're also on the other end, which is I think it's the laggards, and so it's really more of a circle in your case rather than a bell curve.
No, it is. It's like this whole like Stranger Things Wrinkle in Time thing where like it's like a circle. Like it's actually not a line. It's a circle, and I'm on the dot where they meet. Like, and it's fucked with me every decade. And like I swear to God, like every decade of like the world. Granted, I haven't been around for that many, but like, you know, like there's the theme. Like there's the 90s theme, and then there's like the 2000s theme, and it's like I missed them all, but I was there for them all and no one noticed. Like, it's very confusing. And so now this is weird because it's like there's the basic, which I don't know, maybe that's an old thing now. And I'm noticing what's funny to me is I've always been into like what I call like, I guess like granny sweaters or like just big bloppy, comfy. I like being fuzzy and cozy and comfy and bloppy. And I like those, and I like that I can like I don't talk about fashion. This isn't going to all of a sudden become like a fashion podcast. I don't even know how to start
talking. If it was though, could you imagine us having a fashion podcast? Like Jesus. Anyways,
nobody.
I thought about that. No. I thought about that for a second, and I was like, I don't even know what I would be saying in a fashion podcast.
And that's why I'm like, I sound like I'm having like a medical emergency right now. Like, I don't even know where this is going, but I don't even know how to start talking about fashion. So I'm trying to avoid it. But my fashion is very confusing. And I don't know, maybe for other people who aren't me and who aren't putting clothes on me, have other opinions or think things are either more cohesive or less cohesive than I perceive them. I don't know. I don't tend to ask people about my wardrobe because, and I'm being very honest, that started a long, long time ago where I learned important lessons that you shouldn't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to.
Okay.
And now I don't really care what people think about my wardrobe. I just don't have the energy to like field their opinions, because my assumption about my wardrobe is that because I perceive it as a little bit not cohesive, like I have a lot of elements of a lot of different things that I do, and it kind of really depends on my mood and like the time of year and a lot of different things, that anyone's opinions would be very diverse as a result of how kind of messy all of the themes that I have are. So it seems like it would just be a lot of work to talk about, which is why I just don't talk about it. I'm like fine with it. And yeah, that's where it's at. But as a result of that, like one of the staples of my wardrobe is bloppy sweaters, and I like them. And then I've noticed in the last like year, that's been like a thing that like is on social media, and there's hashtags about it, I think. And it's an Instagram thing also, maybe. And I don't really understand why.
You don't.
They're just sweaters.
I don't know. That's all social media kind of like once it makes it on a Pinterest, it's I don't know.
I don't get it. So we're not going to solve the mystery of fashion in this podcast.
But to your question, I think this is your okay. So what is your question to me in all of that? We'll start there.
Oh my god, this is going so well. I guess my question is long-winded. Shocker, because nothing else about me is long-winded at all. Like, everything is very concise when we speak. I never should have like said I had a question. I should have just talked, and then at the end of it, I should have been like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" But with all of these things, this is where the question has come from, and I've just been thinking a lot about this, about all these trends. I'm like, I feel like I fit them enough that I get the short end of the stick for all of them. And I'm ironic enough to I'm accused of them. That's the word I want to use. So like, I don't think it's a good thing. So it's like, I think I fit enough in a bunch of these different things that I can be accused of being a part of them, but I benefit not at all, and I don't actually do any of it on purpose, and it's very confusing, as you can tell from how I'm getting this out.
Okay, so my question initially is like what are the benefits in your eyes of being like
what should there be?
Yeah, like I don't know, like for being in or associated with any of these groups. Like what I guess what are you expecting to get out of it?
I mean, the joke answer is that, like, I don't know, do you get, like, a discount at Starbucks or something? And the actual answer is I don't actually think there is a benefit. It's more of, like, the authenticity thing where I think being part of a group means that you feel like you belong with like-minded people. And unfortunately, when you start talking about trends kind of forming groups, it isn't actually it's not the people that brings it together. It's a lot of surface level stuff.
Well, it's the look. And we talked we talked about this with hipsterism, where like that was like an actual movement that got kind of co-opted and then sold to people at large as an aesthetic rather than like a movement or like a unifying body of thought, right? And that's kind of what it is at this point. Like I think even being like a basic girl was like I don't know that there was necessarily any sort of like unifying movement behind that, but I think that it was something that like started as a joke and kind of just became like a thing. Like I don't know that there's necessarily you probably, well, I mean, if you go to Starbucks enough, you get a gold card, I guess. So like there's sort of a benefit.
Yeah, I know.
To that side of it.
But I think when it stopped being a joke, that's when people started actually identifying by it. And I'm just using this as an example because what like the larger example is things like I think this started when I found meditation, honestly, and I personally and spiritually am very connected with meditation. I think there's no way we can get into it now. We'll have to wait till the new year. It's a very big discussion, but there is a lot around meditation in Western culture and cultural appropriation that I find fascinating and important and worthy of discussion and important to be aware of. And there's like so many things about it. And there is problematic things around the practice of meditation that in itself has been co-opted, and that I've had to deal with a lot of like personal stuff to get through it and to feel like I'm in alignment with things where I want to be, and not that I'm like co-opting or appropriating. But then also getting the part of it that really means something truly to me. And so that's been a very like confusing experience, where it's something that like, it's not as simple as just being like, this might be problematic. Something about this might be off or wrong. So just don't do it. It was like, I came to something and realized that I had a very deep connection to it. And then I noticed areas of it that did not align with my belief systems. And that, fuck, it's scary. Like that's like, that tested my morals a lot. And there's a lot around that, but we were not going to get into it. That was just a tease. And if it makes people like think of things, then great. Like maybe people are going to be like, what does she mean? Oh my God, I didn't like, good. If you didn't ever consider that maybe like certain things are problematic, even if you love them, maybe like dig into that. That's a fun thing to do over the holiday.
Yeah, just some really like light thinking, you know, it's nothing super heavy, but since you have some time off, hopefully, and you've earned this well-deserved rest, maybe just think about that.
Maybe just think about like the most problematic and troublesome things and how we're perpetuating them and like our role in them. That's really easy. I don't think it'll take you very long.
Yeah, and you know what? That actually is a really interesting thing that, yeah, like I would like to talk about at some point, because like the idea of like appropriation, like stuff like that is something that's come up between some other friends and I, so I think that would be a really interesting discussion worth having at some point. So
definitely, I'll write that in the part of my book that actually makes sense, because my notes are bad for this stuff.
Oh yeah, perfect. All right, there we go. So yeah, look forward to that sometime in the new year. Just some, you know, some light listening, like all of our podcast. Light listening.
It won't be difficult to listen to, and it like won't, you know, inspire any like really passionate opinions.
Absolutely. All right. So, why did we start this episode? So, what are we doing?
What was I saying? Holy fuck. Oh yeah. So it really, this whole thing kind of started with that whole endeavor. And when I actually started to like, I don't do yoga, which in some circles makes me seem like an outcast, which is strange, because I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like there was like yoga was a thing, and some people did it, some people didn't.
That was
like,
that was totally that was another part. So that like, certainly makes you less basic and more acidic. I don't know what the inverse of being basic is, but
no, but I don't get it, because there's maybe an equal or opposite, but equally like it's just as like trendy and not really real. Like it's not a real form of a person. I don't get it. Like there's the yoga thing, and I don't do yoga, but I probably should. And I never really felt connected or interested in it. I think because of how like trendy it had become, but like I do yoga on my own, and I don't do it in classes because I've always felt very intimidated by that culture and environment and what it's kind of become, because I don't really understand all of these different trends that are happening and the people that are, it just doesn't align. Whereas like meditation, what I've noticed, and partly because in Edmonton we have, I'm just going to plug them at this point, Lifestyle Meditation. They're awesome. That's where I did my meditation teacher training, and they're super awesome. And we're really like blessed. And I'm very grateful that in our city, we have this place, which is like an awesome community. And in every experience I've had with them, it's been very like-minded people who are very open, and we're all different, but we come together on this thing, and it's not contrived and it's not trendy. I mean, it might be, but we're not doing it for that reason. It really appeals to a group of people that are authentic, from my experience. And I love that. And I've also heard, you know, from maybe like a couple people I've talked to, who are not as engaged in what they're doing in that specific organization or community, that they're like, oh, well, they're just as guilty of this, where they're kind of like a clique or a niche. And like, everyone can be guilty of that, I guess, depending on how you look at it. And that's why I wonder if all of these things, like if the feeling of being an outsider or a feeling like that group is silly or contrived, is there validity in that? Or is it actually just that we're not in it enough to know where the authenticity lies, that we haven't gotten to know the people enough? Like, am I just as at fault for that, where I think that this community of meditation teachers and practitioners, I feel very connected to them personally and spiritually in an authentic way. So I think that they stand as an exception, but then maybe somebody on the outside looking in sees them as the same, and then maybe all of these are the same. Wow, I don't know if any of that made sense.
I think that there is, so speaking to the kind of like, I think that there is an inherently exclusionary element to groups, and it's not always the fault of the group. I think that there's just there's only so much you can do as a member of that group to kind of make it open and welcoming to people who are either thinking about joining or just, as you said, it on the outside looking in. And at a certain point, it becomes like that individual's, or it comes down to that individual's decision on whether they want to engage or not. And like there are definitely a lot of factors that can influence that, kind of the amount of education or information that they have from the group itself or from external sources or whatever, kind of what they're looking for or kind of their expectations on what they hope to get out of that group. So yeah, I think that it's sort of, again, there's like a shared responsibility, but really, I guess by creating that group, you're going to be creating some barriers to entry, just inherently, I guess.
So you said that yoga is that like wrapped into the basic concept?
Oh well, I said yoga pants were in there, but yeah, I think it would be fair to say that yoga is in there as well.
This is such a ridiculous conversation, because like trends are ridiculous sometimes, but
yeah, absolutely.
This is what's strange for me is like, and I'll say I don't do yoga. I don't have anything against yoga as a practice. I've just, I don't know, it does intimidate me. That's the truth. And even as I say that, like people might say, oh, I have this really great yoga studio, and like, great, tell me about them. The reason also that I'm not doing that right now is because I don't have a lot of money, and I'm not working. And it's also just not something that I'm like, I don't really think that it's where I'm at right now for what I want to be doing. I have other stuff that I'm exploring, and still in my meditation practice, that's what I'm doing, and other exercise. So I'm not like looking for recommendations necessarily. I'm just saying that there's something about the yoga culture, especially in Edmonton, that I don't love. And it's hard because it alienates some people when I say that, who love it and are a part of it. And I'm not saying it about any one person. It's just something about the culture makes me very uncomfortable. And it simultaneously like concerns me that practice has been like maybe co-opted or wrapped up in some other maybe negative connotations. So people like me have had these kind of opinions, and now meditation has been more trendy, and that it's going to go the same route. And it's maybe my bias, but because I'm involved in that and not the other, but I don't want that to happen, because one of the reasons I love meditation so much, and I love the community that I've been a part of, is that it is so authentic and it is so real, and it kind of stands in like rebellion in a way to all of these, like, do them because you think you should, or do them because it's trendy. It's like, it brings people in who are in a place in their life where it's just a natural progression. Like it just is. And it's the most raw, and it's the most real, and the most human thing. And it saddens me that is or could be tainted.
So like I now I now see where you're coming at this idea, this idea from. So I think that
This whole segment is hard, and I'm sorry to everyone because we both are like, I've started this, and now I've broken both of us, and I'm sorry. But continue.
No. So I think where you're coming at this from, hopefully I understand this correctly, is the idea that, and this is kind of the extension or where you were kind of building from with the idea of like of being basic or being like in this weird state of feeling both like a trend, like being ahead of the trend and then simultaneously behind, but it's the idea that like you find things as the result of like identifying a like a need or a desire or just something that you don't have in your life that you then figure out how to acquire that thing or to have the experience that you want to have that will help you grow and develop, and like that process is a very personal, very powerful thing. And the idea that those same things, tools, groups that you found, when they go wide, that experience is diluted because it's not wrapped up as much in the personal journey as much as it is just kind of like, well, this is the thing that like everyone's doing and whatever. And like that kind of it doesn't cheapen your experience, but it kind of undermines what those things stand for or what you found in them. Is that kind of, am I close? Am I in firing distance?
Yeah. No, that's definitely it. You summed that up much nicer than I did.
Yeah, no, it's good. We got there. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. Not because I've ever been ahead or in front of a trend ever. I want to make that clear. I probably don't need to because everyone who's listening to this already knows. And if they didn't, they could tell over the course of these podcasts. But
again, that's another example of how I'm not like, I don't ever feel like I'm ahead. I'm behind and ahead. I'm so far ahead, I'm behind, or so far behind, I'm ahead.
Yeah, time is a flat circle.
And again, like, neither one of us would be able to do this podcast if we were like trendsetters by the traditional definition.
We would one, have already been doing a podcast, and two, we would have a much larger audience than we have currently if we were any sort of trendsetter. But no, I think I like the reason that I say that I understand where you're coming from is I think that there are things specifically. Okay, so I'll speak to this from video games and from gaming. Like I'm a really big gamer. You know that. Everyone probably figured that out quite quickly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So listen,
you never told me that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't bring it up very often, so I can understand how you'd be confused. But there, like, I'm torn in a lot of ways because I think that gaming is becoming like a much bigger thing, like culturally. And you see that in the way that like sports franchises are starting to acquire pro video game teams, and like the infrastructure for broadcasting like tournaments and pro play, and even just people who broadcast on Twitch as entertainers are becoming big in the way that like YouTube people are becoming big, and other like internet celebrities and stuff like that. And so I'm of two minds of it because it's a really cool thing, and I love that something I love is getting so popular and that more people are going to become involved and possibly find the things in it that I found. But it is also really scary because like there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of games that I've played, there's a lot of moments that I've had, and there's a lot of stuff that is very important to me, that even now I'm starting to see people talk about kind of much more casually and in a way that indicates that like maybe they don't have that same connection or that level of understanding with something that is really important, that's a part of me and has been for a really long time. So yeah, no, I think I understand where you're coming from in that regard. Like it is really tough seeing something you love not being treated with I guess like the same level of respect. I think on my part, like again, this is talking about video games, so like whatever, right? But but it is also kind of I have to approach it with that same, or I have to approach it with an understanding that like that person doesn't have kind of that same experience, but I guess like I hope that somewhere along the way they will find that moment with something else, and I guess that's kind of like the best I can hope for from how I approach it.
That helps. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I think it's interesting too that we have such different examples, but they have the same kind of result.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I don't know. I don't really have a follow up on that, but yeah, it is really tough. And I don't know that it goes away. It hasn't for me in a lot of ways, because it's still something that I think about on occasion. But yeah, I don't know. I guess hopefully it helps at least just kind of.
Maybe it's hard because like I'm relatively like, I mean, compared to you and gaming, like I'm relatively new in this practice, and like I, much like how I do yoga, I meditated a lot like on my own, and it truly has been a different experience, like meeting other people, and I haven't really like maintained those connections the way that I'd hoped I would, and that's really just a time thing. It's nothing beyond that. But it's still, there's something like in that though that I feel like I can pick those connections up because we share this thing that's I think is important to all of us, like to the same gravity, even not for the same reasons. And that's really it. Like I don't need somebody to care about the stuff that's important to me, like whether it's meditation or other things, for the same reasons that I do. But there is kind of like a synergy and a beauty in being able to connect with people that are as passionate about something, or it means as much to them as it does to you, even if it's like you've come to it for different reasons, you like it for different reasons, your passion comes from different places. You meet where you have that commonality of the gravity of it. And I think that it just stands out a lot more when you interact with people who like the gravity doesn't even exist to them.
Right. And that's much easier to find kind of in this stage now where it hasn't gone wide. Like it's not everyone talking about it. Like when you find someone who's doing this stuff, like you know that they're in it probably to roughly the same degree that you are. Whereas yeah, like as it gets more and more popular, like that is not always the case. And that can be really frustrating in and of itself.
I think that's also what I've noticed is I'm seeing that transition period where I started to get a lot of discomfort around this when I would have more and more interactions with people that are like that would minimize it or would. I think that this is where the labeling conversation started, because I started to really think about this now that I'm kind of thinking back in interactions I had with people like acquaintances or friends of friends in like passing social situations where it was like very they were dismissive of it, or kind of like, oh yeah, like I do too. And it's like in a period of time when a trend, I guess, if you're calling it that, is just picking up, and not enough people know about it. So you're kind of more used to, like what you said, that the people that talk about it or have the vocabulary around it, you sort of know what you're getting with that. It kind of like hits you, and it's really startling when somebody starts that and you think you know where they're going, and it's actually they're just like, no, like it's pretty average or normal or stupid even. Like it's where they have like an immediate judgment at the same time that they're like, I'm a part of it too. It really does cheapen it in a way. Cause it's like, it's not special to you, but you still are a part of it. It's like they have no ownership of it, and they could take it or leave it. And yeah, it's like if it's something really important to you, and something like whether it's gaming or meditation, like people think they know what kind of person you are based on like, because both of those things are activities, they think they know who you are because you do them, or they think they know where to put you, you know?
Totally, yeah. And it's to the point where like if I'm not talking to someone that I know who does, like I kind of steer away from it because like I know what associations there are for someone who isn't a part of like that community or whatever. Like it's way easier just not having that conversation in that case, which is also unfortunate, and it also sucks because like I feel like I'm doing a disservice to this thing that I really care about by like not talking about it. Or
yeah, exactly. Like, or almost like defending it in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also don't want to be that guy who's just like being a dick and like drawing this line in the sand all the time about this stuff. Like it's very complicated. The
line in the sand is hard, and that's a thing that I've experienced because I like meditation is such a like, it's voodoo-ish. Like that's kind of what we talked about in the last one, where that's where I struggle with it, because I could talk with people about other stuff I'm passionate about, but if there's even a little bit more understanding around what that thing is, it's easier automatically. And if I'm being defensive of it, it's like at least they know what I'm being defensive of. Whereas like there's still elements of me and the way that I talk and the things that I do where not everybody gets me. Like actually pretty much nobody gets me, but you relate to that. I think, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I didn't want to speak for you, but we've talked about this at length at various times. So it's that feeling of like, I don't want to put so much work into how I project myself. But there's so many facets of me that are so like misunderstood. And like, I don't think there's anything like special or unique about me that other people don't experience this too. It's just that there's a lot of different things that kind of are at odds with each other almost, where there's people in my life that see me as a completely different person as other people in my life see me. And I kind of step back sometimes and I go like, I'm just being as authentic to myself as I can and trying to know myself and be my best self. And every minute or every day or every year that looks different. But I don't feel like I've drastically changed or set out to be this way or that way. And sometimes it's like you step back and it's like, how do these people have these vastly different perspectives of me?
Yeah, it's very strange. I feel the same way where like I don't think that I act differently around other people or that I act differently between groups of people or whatever. But yeah, it is really interesting how like people can come away with like such a radically different idea of like who you are and what you're about with what I believe and assume to be more or less the same data set.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's strange because I don't know, like maybe everyone experiences this, and the only difference is that we've spent more time with like the taking the step back and realizing that these people have these different opinions. And like, I think probably everyone has this, and it's just that people have varying levels of awareness of how many personas they have out there acting pretty much the same. I mean, yes, we all act different in different scenarios to an extent, but
generally
it's also
speaking, you're still that same core person.
Yeah, and it's other people's perception, because the way that they have lived their life and the way that they are will inform how they see you as well. So there's a lot of There's a lot of factors involved that affects that, and that's another reason, like we talked about, like self-concept and stuff, that's important to realize, especially if we as people, anyone, gets into that funk of like thinking too much about what other people think of us. Like, it is informed by their experiences too, and sometimes it's informed by how we act and project ourselves, sometimes it's informed by them, and most of the time it's a combination of all of it.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
I know that we were talking about like social justice. I didn't touch on this, but this fits in with that a little bit, because when I was in university, I remember having trouble identifying as a feminist, which is a weird thing, because not because I ever didn't identify by it, but the weird social justice, like going kind of too far that we lose sight of what we're fighting for concept. I didn't want to get too wrapped up in that I actually like lost sight of how I felt and my compassion for other people. And it was really upsetting to think that a label that I identified by would be maybe the easiest way to separate myself out from that, even though it was something that I personally, for what it meant for me, meant a lot to me. And this whole like self-concept and stuff, that was really weird. And I'm sure you can remember, because you knew me in university, a lot of people saw me as that, because I would argue for like gender issues and feminist issues, and I would get very passionate and very vocal about stuff. And so it became kind of a running joke around everyone in my life that you can't say certain stuff around me or I'll get fired up, or like, oh, like they would read an article and they'd be like, oh, Chelsea would hate that. And that started to really grate on my nerves, because I was like, I identify by it, but it's not all I am, and I don't always want like to just do that or focus on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that it's at the point where like that sort of stuff, when it starts becoming weaponized against you, or when you start becoming sort of like a cartoon of what you actually are. Like it's a really it's a very minimizing thing to do, or like a very reductionist
and often
thing
we don't have any, like, I don't know if people realize it's happening. Like in my experience, it was like it happened and I don't know how or when. It was like suddenly I was a caricature. Why can't I say that word, Scott? Caricature? I was a caricature. I'm trying to say character and caricature at the same time.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would, yep.
I was like a caricature of myself, and I was like looking around like, how the hell did this happen?
It takes very little for that to happen. Is what I think.
Have you had experiences with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It like, and you know, this is something that like I did to myself as well, and it was back in high school, which is like, it happens all the time, very easily, but yeah, like I ran with a certain crowd, and we were nerds, and that was what it was. But like, actually, you know what? Here, we'll pull an example that is closer to now. Actually, to make this so that I can speak to this a little bit better, because that was like a very different time in my life, and it is what it is, and whatever. That same sort of thing, actually around that same sort of time, was like, because I have I'm gonna say I have a knowledge base that is mile wide and inch deep. Like I like know a lot of like dumb trivia and stuff that I've picked up, and like for whatever reason it gets stuck in my brain. And so a lot of the time when I would join or add to a conversation, it would be one of those, like, guaranteed at least one person would look at me goggle-eyed and say like, oh, well, of course you know that, or that's a really Scott thing to know, or whatever. And like, that was kind of a really weird feeling because I was like, one, I don't really know what anyone else knows, but also like I don't know, I was trying to add to a discussion, and all of a sudden it became just about me, and like and so it's tough because like I felt like I was taking away from a conversation or detracting from it just by being in it, and like that really sucks.
Oh, that's like, that makes me feel things. Um, like, as your friend, like, I'm sorry. I'm sure I did that to you. And I mean, honestly, I'm sure that like our friends are the people that, like the feminist thing was a thing, and I don't blame anyone for it.
No, no,
And
no,
it's
and
something that, you know, like it's not like a thing where I'm like, I don't think anyone, as much as I didn't know what was happening, I don't think anybody else knew it was happening
oh
either.
yeah, no, totally, and
like that's what's so weird.
yeah, and to be clear, like yeah, I don't take it personally. Like I don't I don't resent any of that, and like when I started noticing it, it was sort of like okay, I guess, and like that was kind of more of a signal for me to figure out how I could contribute in like a more in a better way, or like a more meaningful way, because like because there could have been something wrong in my approach as well. Like there's definitely something on my side maybe that I could have done better. But yeah, it wasn't anyone's fault. I just found it very interesting, and somewhat similar to like what you described. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's interesting for you to like use that as an example, because like that's something that I can relate to in knowing you, and it it makes it like my example, like they're both very relevant in this discussion.
Yeah,
And
totally. In the same way, like I'm sure. Well, when I say I'm sure, I mean I know I did like that, some of that stuff to you as well. Like yeah. So
yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like a thing that I like when it was happening to me. It's not like I can pinpoint specific things that certain people said. It was just like you said, you notice it as kind of an overarching thing once it gets to a certain degree, and you make corrections. And it's not really about what other people should or shouldn't be doing. It's more of just informing you, if you're in tune with yourself, to be like, okay, so I don't love the way that this makes me feel, or I don't love the way that this is projected, or that maybe it's just a symbol, or like, you know, like the universe, or it's like self growth, or whatever, however you want to look at it, just giving you kind of a little hint to say, in case you didn't know, this is how you are being portrayed. And if you don't like it, or if it doesn't align with what you want to be putting out there, the only one who really has the power to change it is you. And that's kind of cool in a way.
yeah, and like I think where I come away from that stuff now is yeah, like it's just something that I find really interesting, because yeah, like I said, it doesn't take a lot for kind of a group or like people collectively to notice that like that very Chelsea thing, or that very Scott thing about you. And
yeah, that you don't know, because
yeah,
you're just you, and you're in your head all the time.
Exactly, like you have no, like without other people, like you have no frame of reference for that stuff, and so yeah, it becomes a very interesting tool for introspection if you're into that kind of thing.
I wonder how it's conceptualized for people who aren't into that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, is it
like when someone starts
noticed?
to notice like what their Scott or Chelsea thing is?
Yeah, like if they're not interested, or like don't have like maybe the capacity to do the introspective thing to that degree, is it just like maybe they're actually, maybe it doesn't have a negative connotation at all, maybe they're just like okay, or maybe they notice it. Like, at what point does the disinterest in exploring it kind of take over? Like, is it at the beginning where they don't even flinch, like at the point where we were like, oh, I don't love that? Or did they still experience that and then just don't go farther?
Yeah, I'm sure there's examples of both. Like I'm sure, yeah, that there are people that kind of self-correct and maybe don't think about the why of it. And then I'm sure I'm absolutely sure that there are people that kind of got hung up on that and maybe stewing it a little longer than they needed to.
And I think that maybe that gives rise, unfortunately, to and I mean, I'm not at all saying that you and I are perfect. I mean, the fact that we have that same, which you clearly agree with, and everyone knows, we had the same trajectory, which is interesting. But I think maybe we come by that honestly because we had the same group of friends when a lot of this was happening. So we just had an environment that was, you know what? Maybe these very Scott things or very Chelsea things among a group of people that were less sensitive and less open-minded, maybe it would have been more of a negative experience, and maybe it would have been more about other people and less about introspection. I don't know. Maybe we lucked out, but I think that as much as we're not saying that like we're perfect and we just like we did it all right, like that's not at all what I'm saying. I think that it's possible that this concept could give rise to not taking accountability and not realizing that, okay, it's something I should make a correction for, or that I have the power to make a correction for. And then maybe that's where that attitude of like how other people see you, and I don't know, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy of perhaps the same thing that makes you blame other people is also the thing that makes you care what they think. And both of those can be very damaging for your self-talk.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair to say. I think that one of the places that frustration can come from, is likely a projection thing. Like they're frustrated about not being able to show the best side of themselves, and so they take that out on other people. Like I think that's very much a thing. And
then simultaneously, in taking it on other people, it creates an environment where you're more likely to be susceptible to what other people think. And then it's a kind of a feedback loop, and it sucks. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, we got really deep there. So that was fun. Basically, like my question was like not at all that deep. It was basically just like, am I like going crazy, or like as someone from the outside who's known me for, quite a while, like that kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a Wiccan spiritual voodoo fluffy, like, I think we talked about it in one way a while ago, just like that I seem ironic, or I seem like I'm not a real person, or I seem like I'm a caricature of a person. And the way that I do it is such that sometimes like I wonder if it's even, if anyone who doesn't like spend years getting to know me, if they could believe that like I'm not kidding. Like when I'm like, oh, like meditate on that, or like, and sometimes I can be funny and sometimes I can be like light. I mean, I know that this podcast is not an example of that.
No one will ever know that based on listening to this.
No, but like sometimes I don't take everything too seriously. I can't think of any examples, but like I'm sure that exists. Like I'm not like a stick in the mud. Yeah, but it's interesting. Like the way, like thinking about all this has made me kind of ruminate on my own like self-concept, and just like, is there like a trick I can use to make people believe that I'm not just like that I didn't just like Google a bunch of stereotypes and like try to embody them, that like they're legit like in my soul, like, and they're not stereotypes. Like I don't mean them that way. I feel like they kind of come off as it sometimes.
I don't think it's there's like a trick, and I don't think this is necessarily even like a you thing. I think it's just that like there's a lot of misunderstanding around some of that stuff, in the way that like people feel that they understand, or there's like a lot of connotation around that stuff. So like I don't know if it's necessarily a you thing. I think it's just like those things have connotation and meaning wrapped around them that you don't really have a lot of control over.
And it might just be like, it's not a me thing. It might just be that there's a perfect storm happening where I just so happen to be drawn to a lot of different things that people have very passionate and maybe incorrect understandings of, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of always at odds with each other. And that's like, it's not any individual interest of mine or thing that I embody that's confusing. It's often like the relationship between them all that gets confusing for me and for other people.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, that was fun. Like, it kind of gave me a headache, but it was fun. And I'm sure that like everybody else listening has a headache. At this point, like nobody that we've asked to be our friends is going to be our friends. So
yeah, that's true.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well,